project, Prickly Pears, Portraits of Historical Palm Springs. Today we are talking with Mr. and Mrs. Walter Marks, a couple who since the 1920s has been an active force in the life of Palm Springs. Today we are in Rancho, Mirage, California, and the date is June 27th, 1986. I would like to start with Doris and ask you about your engagement in Palm Springs in 1928. Where did the event take place?
Up at Tom O'Donnell's old house above the present museum. And it was fun. Can't believe it's that long ago.
Do you remember, were there any local people in attendance, local Palm Springs people?
I don't remember.
Your mother and Ann?
Yeah, but they weren't...
They were at the...
Were there Palm Springs?
Well, they were.
No.
We were all staying at the Desert Inn.
At the time, you know.
And Tom and his wife, and I don't remember who else was there.
How did you know Tom O'Donnell?
He was a very good friend of my father's. And he came down here he was ill. And the only Palm Springs really made him come back to life. And he lived about 20 years after that.
And you saw him frequently?
Oh, yeah. I used to play golf with him.
And you played golf?
Barefoot. He used to play barefoot.
At O'Donnell?
Oh, sure. That was the only golf course here.
Right.
They named it after him, actually.
I wanted to ask you how you got, speaking of clubs, how you got involved in the Racket Club. You were a very early member of the Racket Club. You were number three.
And I think I showed you my card.
Right.
And the reason I was an early member, because I played tennis with Charlie Butterworth.
Charlie Farrell.
Charlie Farrell, I should say. And in Beverly Hills, when they were organizing it, Ralph Bellamy. So I said, I'll join. I like Palm Springs. And I bought the 40 acres adjoining the Racket Club on the north. I said, I'll build some houses and we'll get a colony there.
Was that your first land development in Palm Springs?
In Palm Springs,
your
yes.
First real estate venture in Palm
That's
Springs?
right. That was my first, and that was the reason I did it. I thought it was a good opportunity. And the acreage was really 52 acres, and the Racket Club took 12, and I took 40.
How did they decide on that particular location? Do you
Because
recall?
the land was inexpensive.
Aha.
As a matter of fact, it was owned originally by Hicks'
Harold?
father. Harold Hicks's father owned that acreage at one time.
Yes.
That's how we got it.
What year was this?
That was 1934, I think. 33.
Something like that.
33, I
Yes.
think. I think it was 1933. We built our house in 34. And that house had 4 bedrooms and 4 baths and 4-car garage. And it ended up, strange as it may seem, in 1982 or 3, it was given to the Racket Club by the ladies who owned it because it became a pallet club for Palm Springs. And
So that is the start of the Powell Club?
and that house brought to the Palm Springs Desert Museum $100,000. They gave us the house, and I sold the house for the museum.
Right. And how did the museum use it after
Well, we
that?
was part of our funds building everything.
Visiting people or?
Not any particular, was not any particular thing. It just
I
went with the
see.
funds.
I see. Who were some of the people around the Racket Club at that time? Were there?
Well, I built houses for Charlie Farrell and Paul Lucas,
Claire Windsor.
Butterworth, Charlie Butterworth, I should say.
Yes.
Claire Windsor.
Claire Windsor, and a number of other people. But then the people that came out from the east at that time was Donald Stralem, who was became a good Palm Springs friend, and was one of the early presidents of the Palm Springs Desert Museum.
What was it like then? What was the Racket Club like? Was it a fun place to go in the evenings?
Well, it was a
or-
big weekend place.
I see.
It was great. They
People
just had
came-
the original bar, you know,
Yes.
and that was it. And
Was it very informal?
Very.
Yes.
And they built a few tennis courts first, I think they had 4, and then later on they had many more. And the people that played, everybody played tennis all day long.
Were there other courts in town?
No,
Were there?
there wasn't anything at that time. The El Mirador had, I think, 2 courts, and the Desert Inn had 1, but a very old court. But that
So
was,
it was social and recreation.
that's
Right.
right.
Tennis,
It was social
primarily
and
tennis
recreation. That's
and-
right.
When did you start visiting Palm Springs regularly from Los Angeles? I know you owned a home here on a permanent basis for 2 years, and then you've been coming back and forth for over 50 years.
That's right.
When did you start regularly visiting? I know
Well,
you had,
when we had our home in '34, we lived here 4 or 5 months out of the year at that time. I used to come down on the Southern Pacific and spend 3 days here and 4 days in Los Angeles in my office.
was that a long trip? How long was that a long
About
trip?
3 hours.
Not,
I think that's
Too
about
much.
right.
yeah,
And
longer than that.
and then later, when the roads got better, I used to drive back and forth.
And this was in the 40s when you started driving?
Oh,
No,
in
30s.
In the
In the
30s. 30s.
And you said you stayed at the Desert Inn
Well-
initially before you built your house. You would stay at the Desert Inn?
Well, we stay at the Desert Inn some.
Then we rented a house
We rented a house.
on the Cary Grant border afterwards,
The
near,
Nolan
near
house.
the Mirador.
Right.
Big,
Yeah.
sprawling,
It was a
Spanish.
beautiful
Spanish,
house.
it was a divine
Had
house.
6 bedrooms and 6 baths, 6 fireplaces. That was the heat we had.
It was
nice.
great.
Did
Near
you
the El
use the
Mirador. Near
fireplaces?
the El Mirador
Yeah.
Hotel.
What did you do with you had very young children at the time.
Right.
What were the kinds of things that you did with your children?
But they went swimming and horseback riding, and took tap dancing lessons at the Mirador. They had, and there were a lot of other little children out from the east, you know, for a few months. But they didn't go to school because at the time the schools weren't up to par.
Right.
So
You mentioned both the Desert Inn and the El Mirador. Were there differences in atmosphere at the Desert Inn and the El Mirador?
Well, the El Mirador got a lot of the picture people to begin with, and
Easterners.
a lot of Chicago people and New York people. The Desert Inn had some of those people, but they also had a lot of old
more conservative group.
see.
conservative people.
Speaking of nightlife and conservative, what was the nightlife like here in Palm Springs before the 40s? Were there
Well-
clubs, other clubs?
There was 2 places to gamble.
Uh-huh.
One was the Dunes, and one was the 31 Club.
139.
139
Right.
Club.
Right.
139 Club was in Cathedral City, and it was a place, both of them were catering to people, primarily tourists, because the people who worked in Palm Springs, who went there, were not
Allowed to gamble.
allowed to gamble, except some were privileged and got chips and gambled, but never lost any money because they thought that would be bad publicity.
Were there differences between the Dunes and the 139
Yeah,
Club?
one was a dressy place and the other was a late place and for everyone.
The late place was the
139.
139?
139.
Chili and hot dogs.
And the
That's fine.
Dunes was tuxedo and...
Saturday night was tuxedo, other nights informal. Very nice orchestra, good music, good
Were-
dancing.
Beautiful
Were there-
food.
Were there local entertainers at either one? Or,
No.
It
or
was just
did they-
music, dancing, and
Right.
the usual.
Were there any memorable events that took place?
Not
Any
that
fights or-
Not that I recall. We were much younger then,
Yes, we all were.
and we just enjoyed it. It was a good feeling. It was new, and
It's a wonderful place to entertain and,
good place to entertain.
it's fun.
Great climate. We all liked it.
The gambling was restricted to certain clubs, or could you find gambling restricted to these clubs?
Well, they
or-
have to, yes,
That's all.
Yeah,
they had to know you, to get in.
Right.
Even at 139.
They ran it very carefully and very
No.
nice.
Wish they had it now, it'd be fun.
What stores were here, Doris? Were there some of the big name department stores?
Just
at that-
Magnums. Magnums and,
Bullock's opened a store on the grounds of the
Yeah.
Desert Inn.
not Silverwoods, Desmond's. That was it.
Desmond's was here back then.
Came early.
And Mrs. Palm Springs hardware store was here.
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
Wasn't that Lynch,
Then
I think?
Linden? No.
Lincoln.
Right,
Mr. Lincoln,
I remember.
yes.
And Magnum's was very small. It was in the Mirador on the corner.
So it was just
Just,
part of...
just a specialty shop, really.
What was the living like in terms of, where did the food come from? Was it trained in from Los Angeles? Were there
Yes,
supermarkets?
I would
and-
say so.
I
But they
don't
grew
remember.
a lot of things around here, but not
Yeah.
like it developed into a big agricultural.
I don't remember where
center.
we went to market. I don't think there were supermarkets.
No.
And this
Okay.
was pre-air conditioning?
Oh, yeah.
Since
Oh,
it
yes.
is so warm today, we're thinking about what it was like to have lived.
It was very warm then. But we weren't here in June
You
and
weren't here
July.
in this, no, you couldn't be.
No, we
You
weren't
couldn't
here
be.
then.
So,
We were here 4 or 5 months.
your contributions to the present Desert Museum are considerable. What was there cultural life before the war here? Was there
Yes, the
much
opening.
to do
No,
on the
you're-
arts,
you're talking-
visual
you're-
art scene, or
You're talking prior
prior World War II? which-
art and so forth.
Yes, oh,
After all, it's only in the last 30, 35 years that art has become so popular with everyone. And few people have it, but not like today. If you walk into a home, you know you're going to see some art on the walls. I don't think anyone I know that doesn't have it. But that wasn't the case 50 years ago.
and the Desert Museum was primarily a natural history museum,
To begin with,
yes,
that's what it was.
at that time.
And we kind of pushed it into the art field. And then, of course, when we built the building, we had performing arts. And it's been a very interesting development.
Absolutely. Were there any local artists that you
Jack Wilkinson Smith was the one of the painters that I knew.
What about Penny?
Penny or Tenny?
Penny.
Penny. That was another one. There were a few here.
And where were they from? Came from all over and
They came
settled?
from all over, came to see it. This place was very different than any place that most of the Eastern people that finally got here.
Yes.
And horseback riding was a big thing. We all rode horseback. And
Horseback, swam, and played tennis.
Yes.
That was it.
Yes.
That really was it. And after all, it was during Prohibition time, so there wasn't the bars and that sort of
Right.
thing.
You were mentioning the mud baths. What were they?
Just mud. Pure.
And this was
It's not unusual. They've had mud baths all over the world for years. It's
these were at the natural hot springs
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
the spa
that's
area,
Right.
and anyone could partake.
Right.
that's right.
And either of you,
No,
No, we didn't. We were too young, I think.
we didn't need it at that point in our lives.
what do you envision for the desert now and in the future? What do you envision for the desert? Are you primarily interested in the cultural growth of the area? Well, you're also involved in health area as well.
I think the cultural growth is my biggest
That's your-
interest. And I think we have 3 good hospitals in the area. And we should, at this point, in my opinion, see that we have a 4-year college here. And I think the location of the College of the Desert is probably as fine a location as they could possibly get, about halfway between Indio and Palm Springs, in a growing area where there's a great deal of development, a larger shopping center within a few hundred yards. And I think the hospital particularly benefits because of its wonderful, the College of the Desert has a wonderful nursing department. I think now that they have school for management of hotels and country clubs, they have a wonderful department for agriculture, for grass, particularly for golf courses. And food is a big department now, wonderful food. Teach people who want to learn to be chefs. Going to service this area and other areas with well-disciplined, educated people in the field that they want. It's inexpensive and great opportunity, and I think it'll be 2 or 3 times its present size within the next 10 years. I think they have about 4,000 students now. It's my opinion in the next 10 or 15 years they'll have 3 times that, 12,000 people. And the area will support it. We have growth here. We've probably developed in the next 24 months maybe 25,000 housing units. The last 2 or 3 years we developed 25,000 housing units. We're going to grow. It's going to be a wonderful place to live. Not for factories, for retired people, for education, for music. We're going to develop a new music school, continue to grow in College of the Desert. Going to be very important.
How does that tie in with the cultural center at all?
It has nothing to do with the Culture Center. The Culture Center is a separate, wonderful development, but has nothing to do with the College of the Desert. College of the Desert, we're very generous to them. They leased them the land to build the center, but we have about 160 acres there, and we will have everything that goes with a big university there one day. And we're going to have, I think within the next year, a beautiful new sculpture center, and we will have, in my opinion, a place where people will want to come and learn and like the area, and they'll stay here.
Well, I thank you both very much for this interview. You gave us a taste of what was happening 40 and 50 years ago in the desert area, and we've seen a bit of the future. Thank you very much.